Yeah, it's like up in Derby, Delaware, yeah, it's not good. It's not as far, yeah, but like where else where the wine, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, the traffic is like, what's traffic? Yeah, it's just a thing because they hire them and then they get somebody out for a license and then they say, oh, you don't need to or even though they knew they had a license or whatever. But they took what they needed. Yeah, for the time period. No, I just think that it was something. Yeah. I think she was trying to file a morning. Yeah.
Welcome back. Thank
you, Judge. There's something we have to place on the record is the stipulation. And then the stipulation is that in October of 2015, Faraz Amacha was a business associate of David Creato Sr. in Creato Windows and Doors. On November 9th, 2015, Mr. Amacha provided a statement to the Camden County Prosecutor's Office, Homicide Detective Frank Simpson, at the Camden County Prosecutor's Office. At that time, he consented to providing a DNA sample and a buccal swab was collected from him. That DNA sample was sent to the New Jersey State Police Forensic Laboratory in Hamilton, New Jersey for a comparison with other samples. That's it.
All right.
I'm sorry? 378. That was embedded evidence. Excuse me?
That's stipulated. All right. That will be admitted evidence by stipulation. Again, members of the jury, the parties have agreed to certain facts. The jury should treat these facts as undisputed. That is, the parties agree the facts are true. As with all evidence, undisputed facts can be accepted or rejected by the jury and reach a verdict. Ready to the next witness?
I am. Judge, the state's going to call Jennifer Banal.
Ask you to come up and stand directly for the clerk.
Selection on file. State your name for the record. Jennifer Banal. Swear or affirm testimony being accepted is not considered all proof about the party.
Have a seat.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, where you work?
I work for the Office of Forensic Sciences, New Jersey State Police, DNA Laboratory.
How long have you been employed with the New Jersey State Police Lab?
I've been employed with them since October 2003, so approximately 14 years.
And what is your position with them?
I'm a forensic scientist too.
Can you explain to the jury what a forensic DNA analyst does?
A forensic scientist in the DNA laboratory is basically responsible for analyzing any biological evidence that comes into our laboratory. We do this with any of the evidence that comes in from police agencies, prosecuting agencies, and we try and generate DNA profiles from those pieces of evidence and compare those profiles to any known DNA samples that we may also get for a particular case in our laboratory.
And can you tell us, what is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the College of New Jersey, where I majored in biology, and I also have a Master of Forensic Science degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where my area of concentration is molecular biology.
Lawyer, again, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm more than happy to stipulate that this analysis size.
Thank you.
I prefer to continue, Judge. It's not lengthy. Thank you, counsel. Ms. Banal, have you continued your education, let me back up one. Did your formal education referring to college and graduate school, did that include the study of DNA?
Yes, as a DNA analyst in the New Jersey State Police DNA laboratory, we're required to have certain coursework, either through our undergraduate or graduate studies. So I fulfilled all of those areas before I became certified as a clinician.
And have you continued your education by attending courses?
Yes, we are actually required to continue our education through seminars or in-house training. We're required every year to have a certain number of hours of continuing education.
Why are updates important in your particular field?
The technology is always changing in our field, so again, the requirements for the continuing education is that so we can keep up with changing technology.
And how are you trained in DNA analysis?
Within our laboratory, the training program is approximately 9 to 12 months. We go through an intensive program in which we study all of the protocols that we are going to be utilizing in our laboratory. We are also given samples that we work through as if they were from a real case that would come into our lab. The training program also includes watching other certified scientists do DNA analysis. We also have to practice writing reports. We go through a report process. We also have a written exam that we have to pass in order to become certified as an analyst.
And did you successfully complete all of those necessary steps to become certified as an analyst?
Yes, I did.
And what area is your certification?
In nuclear DNA analysis.
And in the course of your training and experience in that field, approximately how many cases or samples have you analyzed using the current DNA methodology employed at your laboratory?
Over the past approximately 13 years that I've been certified, I've probably ran thousands of samples through this DNA analysis method.
And is the New Jersey State Police DNA Laboratory accredited?
Yes, we are accredited by ASCLAS Lab, which stands for the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation.
Do you have to undergo proficiency testing?
Yes.
How often?
We undergo proficiency testing twice a year in the DNA laboratory.
And all of your tests have been satisfactory?
Yes, we have.
Have you testified before as an expert in DNA forensics?
I have.
Judge, at this point, I would offer Ms. Banal as an expert in nuclear DNA analysis.
Absolutely.
All right, again, members of the jury. As a general, witnesses can testify only as to facts known by them. This rule ordinarily does not permit the opinion of the witness. An exception to the rule exists in the case of an expert witness who may give her opinion as to any matter in which she is versed, which is material to the case. Legal terminology. An expert witness is a witness who has some special knowledge, skill, experience, or training that is not possessed by the ordinary juror and who thus may be able to provide assistance to the jury in understanding the evidence presented for determination of the facts of the case. Not bound by such expert's opinion, but you should consider such opinion and give it the weight to which you deem it is entitled, whether that weight be great or slight, or rejected. Examining each opinion, you may consider the reasons given for it, then you may also consider the qualifications and credibility of the expert. With that, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Banal, can you just give us an explanation of what is DNA and where can it be found?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is basically the master molecule of life, and it controls for all of our inherited characteristics. So our hair color, skin color, eye color, that is all determined by our DNA. We inherit our DNA from both of our parents, so we get half from our mom and half from our dad. And again, the combination of our mother and father's DNA determines the way we look. It can determine any types of diseases that we may be prone to. We go through a process in our laboratory to determine what the DNA profile is. It's a four-step process in which we can, again, generate a DNA profile and compare different DNA profiles to one another.
And you can also compare a profile that you developed to a known sample, correct?
Yes.
Can you give us an example of what a known DNA sample would be?
A known DNA sample is basically either a blood stain or a swab from inside of a person's cheek, and that's known as a buccal swab. And we know who the source of that sample is. We call that either a known sample or a reference. And what we do is we develop a DNA profile from that reference, and then we use the DNA profile from the reference to compare to any evidence that's submitted for us.
And when you're making a comparison between an item and a known reference, what kind of results can you possibly receive, can you possibly have?
When we have a reference to compare an unknown DNA sample to, we can make either an inclusion, which means that the source of the known DNA profile is part of the source of unknown DNA profile. We can exclude that person as a source of the profile, and sometimes we do have inconclusive results. We can't make any conclusion based on the results of the unknown DNA profile.
Okay. Did you have occasion to examine some evidence in a criminal matter involving the homicide of Brendan Creato?
Yes, I did.
And once you conducted your analysis, did you have occasion to prepare a written report with your findings?
I did.
Would it assist you in your testimony? Can you refer to your report?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to, may I approach the witness and states exhibit number 371. Now, Ms. Banal, you conducted 3 separate rounds of testing in this case, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to begin with the first round. How many items did you have to analyze or to try to develop DNA profiles for in the first round of testing that you did?
In this first round, I did DNA analysis on a total of 10 items.
Did you, of those 10, were any of them known samples?
Yes, 8 of them were known references.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile for all 8 known references?
Yes, I was.
Okay, can you tell us who the source of those references was? What?
Specimen number 3 was a reference from David Creato Jr. Number 4 was from Julia Stensky. Number 5 was from Samantha Denoto. Number 6 was from William Holshoe. 7 was from Danielle Collins. 8 was from Jason Collins. 9 was from David Creato Sr. 10 was from Lisa Creato.
And what were the other 2 items that you tested in this first round?
The other 2 items were specimens 1 and 2, which were both cigarette butts that were found at the scene.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile for each of the 2 cigarettes?
Yes, I was.
And what can you tell us about the profile you developed?
The DNA profile that I developed from specimen 1 and 2 were from the same individual.
And could you tell from the DNA profile whether that individual was a male or female?
Yes, I could tell from the profile that the individual was a male.
Did you compare that profile Did you compare the profile from the cigarettes with the 8 known samples?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results of that comparison?
I concluded that David Creato Jr., Julia Stensky, Samantha Denoto, William Holshoe, Danielle Collins, Jason Collins, David Creato Sr., and Lisa Creato were all excluded as possible contributors to the DNA profile obtained from specimens number 1 and 2, which were the cigarette butts.
And did you later receive an additional known source for comparison purposes from an individual named Faraz Amacha?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile for Mr. Amacha?
Yes.
Did you compare his profile with the profile that you had developed with the cigarette butts?
Yes.
And what were the results of that comparison?
I would need to refer to that report.
Okay, that testing was done a little bit later, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get to that when we get to that next round of testing. Are you familiar with what is called the CODIS system?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell the jury what it is?
CODIS stands for Combined DNA Index System, and it's just a national database of DNA profiles. It mainly contains profiles from crime scenes. There are unknown profiles that are put into this database. And what happens is labs across the country can put in profiles that they develop from evidence and enter these profiles into this database to see if there are any matches to existing profiles in the database.
And the other existing profiles would include known criminal offenders, correct?
That's correct.
All right, was the DNA profile that you developed from the cigarette butts eligible to be entered into that CODIS system?
At the time that I wrote my report on October 28, 2015, it was ineligible.
Now, can a profile sometimes be entered if there was a specific request to enter it or more information is provided to the lab?
Yes.
And was that done in this case with regard to the cigarette butts?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. After that first round of testing with those 10 items, did you conduct testing on additional items?
I did.
And did you have occasion to prepare another report with regard to your findings?
Yes.
And that was on November 2nd, 2015, correct?
That's correct.
Let me hand you this to Mark presentation, State's Exhibit number 373. Take a look. Okay, during the course of the second round of your testing, how many items did you receive?
I received a total of 3 items.
Can you tell us what those 3 items were?
Yes. Item number 11 was a DNA reference from the victim, Creato. Number 13 were applicators from the bathroom floor of scene number 2. And number 14, also applicators from the bathroom floor of scene number 2.
And were you able to develop a DNA profile for each of the swabbings from the bathroom floor?
Yes, I was.
And what can you tell us about the profiles?
The profiles from specimens number 13 and 14, which were the applicators from the bathroom floor, they both reacted as mixtures of DNA profiles. Basically, what a mixture is a mix of 2 or more DNA profiles. So you can tell from the results whether there was just one person contributing to a DNA profile or whether there was more than one person.
And there was more than one person in this case?
Yes.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from the reference submitted for Creato?
Yes, I was.
And the mixture of the profile that you developed from the bathroom swabs, did you compare that with the DNA reference from Brendan as well as the other 8 known samples that you had in your possession at that time?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results of that comparison?
When I compared the mixture profiles from specimens number 13 and 14, I concluded that the DNA profile from number 11, which was the profile from the victim, was excluded as a possible contributor. I also concluded that the other 8 DNA profiles that I generated from the references were also excluded. Excuse me, the other 6 profiles were excluded. I did determine that the mixture of DNA profiles existed and that David Creato Jr. was identified as the source of the major DNA profile, and that the DNA profile of Julia Stensky matched the minor DNA profile.
And as part of your report, the second page of your report, does that contain a chart?
Yes, it does.
Judge, if I may, I've marked this for identification, State's Exhibit 364. In my experience, it's been very hard to see on the screen, so I just made a copy for everyone to look at it so they can see it. And I'm going to ask the witness to explain that.
Yes, you have no objection.
No, you won't.
And you have a copy of this chart of everything, correct? Mr. Bernard, this is the best way for me to ask this question of you is, could you please explain this chart to the jurors?
This chart is our DNA laboratory reports STR allele table. I generated this for laboratory number C15-06212 on November 2nd, 2015. If you look at the top portion of the chart, on the headings, there's a specimen number. In that column are just the specimen numbers that I received for that particular case. The description or source. Again, as an example, for number 11, the description for that was the DNA reference from the victim. And then across the top are a bunch of letters and numbers. D8, S1179, D21, S11. If you look all the way across. Those letters and numbers represent locations along the DNA chromosomes that we are analyzing in our laboratory. So we are looking at 15 different locations. And just to give you a general idea, it's the combination of the profiles at those 15 locations that give us a complete DNA profile. So for number 11, the DNA reference from the victim, the first set of numbers, 1314, represents the inheritance of that particular location from the parents. So at this location, he inherited a 13 from one parent and a 14 from the other. At the next location, he inherited a 26 from one parent and a 30 from the other. And again, you just go along to the 15 different locations. At the amelogenin locus, which is about the third column from the right, you can see there's either an XY or an XX there. The XY represents a male profile, and the XX represents a female profile. So in our laboratory, what we do is we generate these profiles for all of evidence and the known references we receive for a case. And we're able to draw up this chart and basically are able to make the comparisons using this chart and the numbers that we generate for the DNA profile.
Okay, and as we look along and go down the chart, I believe you testified earlier this was a mixture. In looking at items or specimen number 13 and 14, some of those boxes have more than 2 numbers in them. So what does that indicate?
Anytime you have a location that has more than 2 numbers, you would explain that by saying it's a mixture. So there was more than one individual contributing to that DNA profile. Again, because we inherit one number from our father, one number from our mother, we would expect that we'd only see 2 numbers for any one individual. So anytime you have more than 2 numbers in one of those boxes, then we have to assume that there is more than one individual contributing to that DNA.
So what is it that's represented on this chart that leads you to conclude that the defendant is the source of the major profile and the mixture from swabbings on the bathroom floor?
In specimen number 13, the applicators from the bathroom floor, you'll see that there are numbers kind of on the top line of that, the 1314, the 2629, the 1010, the 1011. And then there are also numbers in parentheses. The numbers on the top line of that are called the major profile. And what that basically shows us is that the data that I generated from that shows me that that individual is the person that is contributing the predominant amount of DNA to that mixture. Anything in parentheses tells me that there is another person in that DNA mixture, but that person is contributing a lesser amount of DNA to the mixture. So if you take a look at number 13, specimen number 13, and just look across at strictly the major profile, if If you look at the first location at D8, there's a 1314. If you look down to number 3, which is the DNA reference from David Creato Jr., he is also a 1314. The second location, the major, is 2629. He's a 2629. There's a 1010 in the next location. He's a 1010. There's a 1011. He's a 1011. And again, if you just look all the way across on that top line in the major profile, you'll see that every single one of those locations matches the DNA profile of David Creato Jr.
And your conclusion that he was the source of that major profile, do you hold that conclusion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes, I do.
And I believe you also concluded that Ms. Stensky was a match to the minor profile. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
I do.
And can you explain again, using the chart, how you came to that conclusion with regard to Julia Stensky?
Again, for lesson number 3, if you look at the minor profile or the numbers that are in the parentheses, if you look at the first location at D8 S1179, there's an 11 in parentheses. She is an 1113, so part of her DNA profile is represented in that mixture. At the second location, there is a 30 in parentheses. Julia Stensky has a 30 also in her DNA profile. If you look at the fifth location, there's a 15 in parentheses. She also has a 15 in her DNA profile. And again, what we're doing is just looking at each of those numbers that's in the parentheses to see how they compare to any of the references that we receive. And in this case, each of the numbers in parentheses for specimen number 13 matched up with at least one of the numbers that Julia Stensky has in her DNA profile.
Now, you've referred to the defendant as being a source and Julia Stensky being a match. Can you tell us what is the difference between a source and a match?
Yes, in our laboratory, we deem a DNA profile to be, or an individual to be the source of a DNA profile if they meet a certain statistical threshold. Whenever we're able to make a comparison to a reference, we actually calculate a statistic to determine what the strength or the rarity of that profile would be in a population. So when I conclude that the person is a source of the DNA profile, they have met that specific DNA, the statistical threshold for us to be able to report that as the source of the major DNA profile. So in terms of my opinion as to who left that DNA profile there, if I say that that person is the source, then my opinion is that the DNA profile that we developed from, in this case, the applicators in the bathroom, came from David Creato Jr.
I'm going to just go these charts again. Thank you. After the second round of testing that we just saw the charts on, did you conduct additional testing, a third round of testing, I should say?
Yes.
Okay, and was it during that third round of testing that you had the opportunity to compare the buccal swab of Farasa Matcha with the cigarette butts?
Yes.
Okay, and at that time, or did you report that? When was your second round of testing? Your report is dated, I'm sorry, third round is dated December 23rd, 2015, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And at that time, you had received an additional DNA reference from Farasa Matcha, correct?
Yes, it's specimen number 16.
Okay, and did you also receive some swabbings from a stroller?
Yes.
How many of those swabbings did you test?
I tested 3 of the swabbings from the stroller.
And can you tell us which swabbings did you look at?
I looked at specimen number 15-1-1, which was a swabbing from the headrest.
Okay.
I also looked at 15-1-2, which were swabbings, which was swabbing from the armrests.
Okay.
And 15-1-5, which was swabbing from the handles.
And were you able to reach conclusions with regard to those 3 swabbings?
Yes, I was able to develop profiles from 15-1-1, which is from the headrest,
Okay.
and 15-1-5, which were from the handles.
Okay, were you able to develop any profile whatsoever with regard to the armrests?
With regard to the armrest, I was not able to develop any type of profile.
Well, did you reach conclusions with regard to the swabbings from the headrest and the swabbings from the handles?
In regards to the swabbing from the headrest, which was 15-1-1, I was not able to make any conclusions concerning any contributors because of the nature of the DNA profile that I obtained.
Okay, and how about with regard to the handles?
With regard to the handles, which was 15-1-5, there was a mixture of DNA profiles which was consistent with at least 3 contributors in that specific sample. And due to the nature of the mixed DNA profile, I was not able to reach any conclusions concerning any contributors.
Judge, I have this table marked as states exhibit number 376. And you have a chart in front of you, Ms. Bernard?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so we're looking at a chart that contains essentially the same information as the last chart with regard to the alleles, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to focus on items 15.1, 15.2, and 15.5. In looking at those, how much of a profile were you able to develop off of the headrest?
For 15.1.1, which is the headrest, I was only able to generate 1 number or 1 allele, which was at the D13S317 locus.
Okay. And are you able to do anything at all, and that's the results you get, 1 number for 1 of the alleles?
No, because there was such little DNA on this particular sample, or because I wasn't able to generate a better profile from this, I wasn't able to make any conclusions.
And with regard to, well, actually, if we look here on 15.1.2, that was the armrest. What results did you get there when you attempted to develop a profile?
From the armrest, if you can see, it says NR all the way across 15 locations anamyelogenic, and NR means no reaction. And that basically means that I wasn't able to develop a profile at any of those locations.
And with regard to the swabbings from the handles, what can you tell us about that?
The swabbings from the handles, I was able to generate the mixed profile at 10 locations. However, again, because based on the data that I was able to generate, I concluded that there were at least 3 contributors in that mixture, and therefore I could not make any comparisons or conclusions as to who contributed to that mixture.
So essentially then there were really no results from the stroller. Thank you, Ms. Bernard. don't think I have any more questions.
Press 7A.
That partial profile that you developed on the stroller handles with the mixed contributors, at least 3 contributors, one you were just talking about.
I'm sorry?
The one you were just talking about.
Yes.
Did you ever compare that to the profile from the cigarettes?
Again, because of the nature of the mixture, I was not able to make any comparisons to any other DNA profiles that were generated.
You wouldn't even be able to exclude or say someone's consistent with
The only time that we would
alleles that they have?
The only time that we would make those types of comparisons are with references. So I wouldn't make any comparisons between unknown samples in one case and other unknown samples in the same case.
Okay, I understand. So in short, then the answer is no. You weren't able to compare the handle DNA to the cigarette DNA? Or never?
No.
Okay. Just really briefly, this bathroom floor swab, where you said it's Creato. You said that he's the major component and Julie Stensky appears to be the minor component?
Yes, she matched the minor portion of that mixture.
And you say he's the source, meaning it's definitely him, right?
Yes. Again, in our laboratory, it has to reach a certain statistical threshold, and the major DNA profile compared to Mr. Creato's profile did reach that threshold.
And your laboratory is like 1 in 7.1 trillion or something like that?
1 in 7 trillion.
So, it's in. You can't say when that DNA got here, right?
No, I cannot.
And so it's clear you're not trying to suggest that his blood on his bathroom floor is in some way nefarious or anything, right? Can you say whether the DNA that you're testing, what you described as a sample, whether that mixture of what you believe is Creato's and Stensky's, whether it was put there at the same time, that DNA?
I would not be able to tell that.
And when you say mixture, you're talking about, it's a DNA mixture, not a blood mixture, right?
We specifically test for DNA. Any of the preliminary testing that's done by our serologists can determine whether it's a blood sample, whether it's saliva, or any other biological fluid.
But, for example, if Stensky steps barefoot on the floor of the bathroom, and then at some point, a day later, a week later, the same day, Creato drips blood on the bathroom, that swab's done, that could explain reasonably how there's this mixture of DNA, right?
It is possible that that could happen.
It doesn't have to be that 2 people bleed at the same time or their blood gets mixed together or anything like that. That's not what you're saying, right?
No, we're just testing for the presence of DNA. So whether that comes from blood or any other biological fluid, I wouldn't be able to tell.
Or skin cells or anything else?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing I want to talk to you about, Ms. Banal, is CODIS. You said the combined DNA index system?
Correct.
And that is run at 2 levels, right? The state level and the federal level?
Yes.
And it's the federal levels that have every single state included?
Yes.
Okay. So the samples from the cigarettes, you did run through CODIS, or someone ran through CODIS, is that right?
Yes, they were run through CODIS.
And if you know, it didn't come back to anybody, right?
I don't believe it did, but I wasn't the one that ran it through CODIS, so I'm not sure of that.
Okay. Ms. Banal, it's a database of primarily criminals, fair?
It does contain convicted offender profiles, yes.
And I guess there's some other stuff, missing persons and things like that, that can be excluded, right?
Right.
But largely, it's a database of convicted offenders.
Yes.
So if a person's never been arrested or convicted of a crime, they're not in CODIS, right?
Their reference would not be in CODIS, yes.
Right. It's not like some situation where everybody's DNA is in there or anything like that, right?
No.
You have to be, essentially you have to be convicted. 99% of who's criminals. Okay. Once a sample is run through CODIS, is it just run through CODIS indefinitely?
Yes, that sample, the DNA profile from that sample stays in CODIS, and there are basically weekly searches that are done to compare any existing samples in CODIS to any new samples that might come in.
Okay, so these two cigarette butts, and that's the same person, right? The two cigarette butts?
Yes,
And it's definitely not Creato, right?
that's correct. It is.
If these two cigarette butts are in CODIS, basically every week or every 2 weeks or twice a week from now until that person comes up in CODIS, if ever, they're just going to be continually searchable, right?
Yes, in this case, only one of the profiles from the cigarette butt, because they were essentially the same profile, only one of those samples was put in. And yes, it would just be searched every week.
So tomorrow afternoon, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, if the person whose DNA profile matches the DNA profile in the cigarette, which is to say, the person who was smoking that cigarette is convicted, put into CODIS, it'll pop up, right?
Yes.
Okay. And lastly, this DNA from the bathroom floor definitely wasn't Brendan Creato's, right?
That's correct.
Thanks. I have nothing else for you. I appreciate you.
No, Judge, thank you.
I step down. Thank you very much. Can we start a second break at this point?
Judge, actually, I have a quick stipulation reading to the record, if that's okay. Judge, I titled this one, it's CODIS stipulation, and it reads, during the trial, reference has been made to the DNA profiles developed from the cigarette butts located and collected at Cooper River Park on October 13, 2015, was being compared with the database of DNA profiles. This database is called CODIS, which stands for Combined DNA Index System. CODIS is a catalog of DNA profiles submitted by forensic laboratories. There is a federal CODIS database and a state CODIS database of DNA profiles. If called to testify, the CODIS administrator from the state of New Jersey State Police Forensic Laboratory, Ava Samuel, would testify that the DNA profile developed from the two cigarette butts collected in Cooper River Park has been searched in both federal and state CODIS databases. Because a full DNA profile was developed from the cigarette butts, it has been compared against all criminal offender indexes and all crime scene evidence profile indexes. The comparisons are run weekly at the state level and twice each week at the federal level. As of Monday, May 1st, 2017, there were no matches identified or pending in either the state or federal database for the DNA profile developed from the cigarette butts in question. And that's 379.
And that's me, in my stipulation. Again, members of the jury, the parties have agreed to certain facts. The jury should treat these facts as undisputed. That is, the parties agree that these facts are true. As with all evidence, undisputed facts can be accepted or rejected by the jury to achieve a verdict. We are going to take our second morning break at this time. But before we do that, I'm going to ask the jurors to just consult with one another for one issue. When we started the trial, you will recall the counter. And next week was the week that there was only going to be 1 day of trial. And that's because I am required, as all criminal judges in the state are required, to attend certain seminars. So I will not be available at the seminars. The following week, which was the week of the 16th, I indicated that I would not be available on the 18th. We're here all week this week, so next week it's only 1 day. The next week was going to be 2 days. I have endeavored to change my schedule, which I think I succeeded in doing, to make myself available on the 18th. I spoke to the attorneys. They don't have any problems with using that date as a trial date. However, because when we started, I said we would not be here that date. If I tell you to be here that date, if somebody's made arrangements or there's something on somebody's schedule, I'm going to recognize that and say we won't use that day. However, I'm going to ask your court person to just report back when you come in. If everybody's good to come, that wouldn't be next week, it would be the week after. And we would then have, as it stands now, we're going to be here Tuesday and Wednesday that week. We would be here, if necessary, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that week. But that is, and the date would be the 18th. That's good with everybody. I'll just ask your court person to report that to me when you come back out. And then that would be a trial thing, so you put that on your, but again, because initially I indicated that I was not available, I think it's better for me to change my schedule so that we can be together. So talk about that during this break. That's the only thing you should talk about the trial. Don't discuss any other aspect of the trial. Don't discuss any evidence heard, received, or of course of the trial with your fellow jurors. Don't do any research. Let's hear everybody back. It's going to be our 15 minutes.
Thank you, Brian.
Everybody can have a seat. I'll see everybody back in 15 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Raj.
He just kept saying.